In the kingdom of Valdoria, where golden towers pierce the morning mist and ancient secrets hide behind every stone wall, danger often wears a familiar face. When trust becomes a weapon and family bonds turn into chains, even the youngest prince must learn that survival requires more than royal blood. It demands courage, cunning, and sometimes, the helping hand of an unexpected ally. Prince Marcus stood at his bedroom window, watching the sun paint the castle courtyard in shades of amber and rose. At 12 years old, he had the curious mind of a scholar trapped in the restless body of an adventurer. His dark hair caught the morning light as he pressed his face against the cool glass, counting the guards who patrolled below. 23 today, instead of the usual 18. Something was different. "Your Highness," came a gentle voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see Sir Edmund, his personal guard, entering the chamber. The knight's weathered face bore the marks of countless battles, but his eyes held nothing but warmth when he looked at the young prince. "Your mother, the Queen, requests your presence in the blue drawing room." Marcus sighed, reluctant to leave his window perch. "Must I, Sir Edmund?" "I was hoping to visit the library today. Master Aldwin promised to show me the ancient maps of the northern territories." Sir Edmund's expression grew thoughtful. He had been assigned to protect Prince Marcus since the boy's 8th birthday, and in those 4 years he had grown genuinely fond of the curious, kind-hearted child. Unlike his older brothers who were being groomed for military command and diplomatic service, Marcus possessed an insatiable appetite for knowledge and an uncommon compassion for the castle's servants and common folk. "I'm afraid the Queen was quite insistent, Your Highness. She mentioned that Lord Cassius would be joining you both." At the mention of Lord Cassius, Marcus felt a familiar chill run down his spine. The man was his mother's distant cousin, elevated to a position of influence within the royal court following the death of his father 2 years prior. While Queen Isabella trusted Cassius implicitly, something about the man made Marcus deeply uncomfortable. Perhaps it was the way Cassius's pale gray eyes seemed to catalog every word Marcus spoke, or how his thin smile never quite reached those calculating eyes. "Very well," Marcus said, straightening his shoulders in the way his etiquette tutor had taught him. "I suppose duty calls." Sir Edmund nodded approvingly. The boy was learning to shoulder responsibility, even when it went against his personal desires. As they walked through the castle's winding corridors, Sir Edmund couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been growing stronger each day. Lord Cassius had been requesting more private audiences with the Queen, and there had been hushed conversations that ceased abruptly whenever Sir Edmund entered a room. The blue drawing room was one of Queen Isabella's favorite spaces, decorated with tapestries depicting the legendary founding of Valdoria, and furnished with comfortable chairs arranged around a massive fireplace. When Marcus and Sir Edmund arrived, they found the Queen seated elegantly by the window, her golden hair gleaming in the sunlight. Across from her sat Lord Cassius, his black coat impeccable and his posture rigidly formal. "Ah, Marcus," Queen Isabella said, rising gracefully to embrace her youngest son. "Come, sit with us. Lord Cassius has been telling me about the most fascinating opportunity." Marcus allowed himself to be seated between his mother and Cassius, while Sir Edmund took his customary position near the door. Something in the knight's stance suggested heightened alertness, though Marcus couldn't quite identify what had changed. Lord Cassius leaned forward slightly, his pale eyes fixed intently on Marcus. "Your Highness," he began, his voice smooth as silk, "I've been corresponding with my dear friend, Duke Aldrich of Thornwood. He has extended a most generous invitation for you to visit his estate in the northern mountains. It would be an excellent opportunity for you to see more of the kingdom and perhaps learn about the mining operations that provide so much of our realm's wealth." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Thornwood was nearly a week's journey from the capital, through treacherous mountain passes that were often closed by snow even in late spring. More troubling still, Duke Aldrich had a reputation for cruelty toward his subjects and had been involved in several boundary disputes with neighboring lords. "That sounds quite educational," Marcus replied carefully, glancing toward his mother. "Though I confess I'm surprised by Duke Aldrich's interest in hosting a royal visit, as he extended similar invitations to my brothers." Queen Isabella's expression flickered with something Marcus couldn't quite read, surprise perhaps, or concern. "Your brothers are occupied with their military training and diplomatic studies. Lord Cassius felt this would be an ideal opportunity for you to gain some practical experience in governance." Sir Edmund stepped forward almost imperceptibly. In his years of service, he had developed an instinct for danger that had saved his life more than once. Every fiber of his being was now screaming warnings. The timing was suspicious. Why now, when political tensions were high? Why Marcus, the youngest prince, rather than one of his older brothers? And why had he heard nothing of this invitation through normal royal channels? "If I may inquire, Lord Cassius," Sir Edmund said respectfully, "what arrangements have been made for His Highness's security during this journey?" "The northern mountains can be quite dangerous, particularly at this time of year." Cassius's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Naturally, Duke Aldrich will provide adequate protection. His personal guard is quite capable, I'm assured. Besides, this is meant to be an educational visit, not a military expedition." Marcus noticed that Sir Edmund's hand had moved subtly closer to his sword hilt. The knight's instincts had always been sharp, and Marcus had learned to pay attention to such signals. "Mother," he said slowly, "might I ask when this visit is supposed to take place?" "I had hoped to complete my studies with Master Aldwin before undertaking any lengthy travels." "Actually," Cassius interjected before the Queen could respond, "Duke Aldrich is hoping you might depart as early as tomorrow. He's planning a special ceremony to welcome you, and the preparations are already well underway." The room fell silent. Even Queen Isabella looked startled by the sudden urgency. Marcus felt his heart begin to race. Something was very wrong. Royal visits were typically planned months in advance, with extensive security arrangements and diplomatic protocols. The idea of departing for a remote location on less than a day's notice was virtually unthinkable. Sir Edmund's training took over. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "perhaps it would be wise to discuss the security arrangements in more detail before finalizing such plans. The Royal Council typically reviews all travel outside the capital region." Cassius's facade finally began to crack. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Sir Edmund, and when he spoke, there was a sharp edge to his voice. "I hardly think it's appropriate for a mere guard to question arrangements made by members of the royal family." The insult hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Sir Edmund had served the crown faithfully for over 20 years, had saved the life of Marcus's father during the border wars, and was trusted implicitly by the royal family. To dismiss him as a mere guard was not only disrespectful but strategically unwise. Marcus stood abruptly, his young face flushed with anger. "Sir Edmund is not a mere guard. He is a knight of the realm and has served my family with honor and distinction. I will not have him spoken to with such disrespect." Queen Isabella looked between her son and Cassius, clearly torn between family loyalty and political considerations. "Perhaps," she said diplomatically, "we might postpone this visit until proper arrangements can be made." Marcus raises valid concerns about the timeline, but Cassius was not to be deterred. His voice took on a harder tone as he addressed the Queen directly. "Isabella, surely you understand the importance of this opportunity. Duke Aldrich has invested considerable resources in preparing for the prince's visit. To cancel now would be seen as a significant slight, potentially damaging our relationship with one of the kingdom's most important noble houses." He could see the conflict playing out in her expression, her natural protective instincts warring with her sense of political obligation. Queen Isabella had always tried to shield her children from the harsher realities of royal politics, but she also understood the delicate balance required to maintain the kingdom's stability. Sir Edmund cleared his throat softly. "Your Majesty, if I might suggest a compromise, perhaps His Highness could visit Duke Aldrich at a later date when proper security arrangements have been made and the Royal Council has had time to review the proposal." Cassius's mask finally slipped completely. His pale eyes flashed with anger as he turned on Sir Edmund. "You seem remarkably determined to interfere in royal family decisions, knight. One might wonder about your motivations." The accusation was barely veiled but unmistakable. Sir Edmund felt the blood drain from his face, not from fear for himself, but from the realization of what Cassius was attempting. By questioning his loyalty, Cassius was trying to isolate Marcus from his most trusted protector. Marcus stepped closer to Sir Edmund, his chin raised defiantly. "My motivations are perfectly clear, Lord Cassius. I trust Sir Edmund's judgment implicitly. If he believes this journey requires more careful planning, then I agree with him completely." The young prince's declaration created a moment of crystalline clarity for everyone in the room. The battle lines had been drawn, not over a simple travel invitation, but over something far more significant. Marcus had chosen his side, and in doing so, had forced everyone else to reveal their true positions. Queen Isabella rose slowly, her regal bearing reasserting itself. "I think," she said with quiet authority, "that this discussion has become rather heated. Lord Cassius, I appreciate Duke Aldrich's generous invitation, but Sir Edmund raises valid concerns about security and protocol. We will need to discuss this matter further before making any decisions." Cassius's jaw tightened, but he managed a stiff bow. Of course, Your Majesty. I simply hope to provide Prince Marcus with an enriching experience. Perhaps I was overzealous in my enthusiasm. As Cassius prepared to leave, he paused near Marcus, leaning down as if to offer a farewell pleasantry. But the words he whispered were for the prince's ears alone. Enjoy your knight's protection while you can, young prince. Even the most loyal dogs can be removed when they outlive their usefulness. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach, but he kept his expression carefully neutral. Only when Cassius had left the room did he allow himself to look at Sir Edmund, whose weathered face was grim with understanding. "Mother," Marcus said quietly, "I think I would like to return to my chambers now. I find I'm not feeling particularly well." Queen Isabella nodded, concern evident in her eyes. "Of course, darling. Sir Edmund, please escort him safely." As they walked through the castle corridors, Marcus waited until they were well out of earshot before speaking. "Sir Edmund, what just happened in there? That wasn't really about a visit to Duke Aldrich, was it?" The knight was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Your Highness, I believe Lord Cassius has plans that may not be in your best interests."
His urgency to remove you from the castle, combined with his attempts to dismiss your security detail, suggests something far more serious than an educational visit. Marcus nodded slowly. Even at 12, he understood the implications. "What do you think we should do?"
Sir Edmund stopped walking and turned to face the young prince.
"First, we need to gather more information. I have contacts among the castle staff and the guard who might have noticed unusual activities.
Second, we need to ensure your safety while remaining vigilant but not appearing suspicious ourselves."
You mean we're going to investigate Lord Cassius?
"I mean, Your Highness, that we're going to be very, very careful, and we're going to trust only each other until we know who else we can rely on." As they reached Marcus's chambers, both prince and knight were unaware that their conversation had not gone unnoticed. In the shadows of a nearby alcove, one of Cassius's servants had been listening intently and was even now hurrying to report what he had overheard. The game, whatever it was, had begun in earnest.
And Prince Marcus, despite his youth, was about to learn that sometimes the greatest dangers come not from enemies outside the castle walls, but from those who sit at the family dinner table. That evening, as darkness settled over Castle Valdoria like a heavy blanket, Marcus found himself unable to sleep. Every creak of the ancient timbers, every whisper of wind through the corridors, seemed to carry hidden threats. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the afternoon, and trying to make sense of the undercurrents he had felt in that blue drawing room. Sir Edmund had positioned himself in the antechamber outside Marcus's bedroom, a practice that had become standard since the uncomfortable conversation with Lord Cassius. The knight maintained the pretense of routine guard duty while actually conducting a careful surveillance of anyone who approached the prince's quarters.
His instincts, honed by years of combat and court intrigue, told him that events were moving quickly towards some kind of crisis. Around midnight, Marcus heard soft footsteps in the corridor outside.
He slipped quietly from his bed and pressed his ear to the door, listening intently. The footsteps paused, and he heard the low murmur of voices. Sir Edmund speaking with someone Marcus couldn't identify.
"Thomas," Sir Edmund was saying quietly. "What news from the stables?"
Marcus recognized the voice that answered as belonging to Thomas Redbrook, the head stableman. A man whose family had served the royal house for 3 generations and whose loyalty was beyond question.
"Sir Edmund, there's been unusual activity tonight."
Lord Cassius's men have been preparing horses and provisions for what appears to be a long journey. At least 6 riders, with enough supplies for a week's travel through rough country. They've also been asking questions about the guard rotations and which routes are typically used for royal travel.
Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. 6 armed riders prepared for a week-long journey through rough country. This was no simple pleasure trip or diplomatic mission.
This was the kind of preparation made for something far more serious and potentially dangerous. "Any indication of their intended destination?" Sir Edmund asked. One of the stablers overheard mention of the northern passes, but they went silent when they realized they were being observed. "Also, Sir Edmund," Thomas's voice dropped even lower, forcing Marcus to strain to hear. "There's been talk among some of the newer guards, men Lord Cassius brought with him when he joined the court.
They've been discussing changes coming to the castle hierarchy. Some seem to think Prince Marcus might be
leaving permanently." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. He stepped back from the door, his mind racing. Lord Cassius wasn't just planning an unwelcome visit to Duke Aldrich. He was planning something that would remove Marcus from the castle permanently. But why? What could a 12-year-old prince possibly threaten? Sir Edmund's voice carried a new urgency when he responded. Thomas, I need you to do something for me. And it must be done with absolute discretion. Send word to Captain Harrison of the King's Guard that I request a private meeting at dawn in the Old Armory. Tell him it concerns the safety of Prince Marcus, but make sure no one else overhears this message. Consider it done, Sir Edmund. And sir, my brother Willem serves in the Duke of Thornwood's household. He's written to our family recently, mentioning strange preparations being made there as well. Large numbers of armed men gathering and talk of important visitors expected soon. But Willem says the Duke's mood has been darker than usual, and several servants have been dismissed without explanation. Marcus pressed his hand to his mouth to stifle a gasp. Thus he said passion. The pieces were beginning to form a terrifying picture. This wasn't just about removing him from the castle. This was about taking him somewhere specific, to Duke Aldrich of Thornwood, a man known for his cruelty and his ambition. But what could Cassius and the Duke possibly gain from harming a young prince? After Thomas departed, Marcus waited several minutes before quietly opening his door. Sir Edmund turned immediately, unsurprised to find the prince awake. You heard, the knight said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. Sir Edmund, I've been thinking about what Lord Cassius said today, and about my father's will. Do you remember the provisions regarding succession? Sir Edmund's expression grew thoughtful. King Alexander had indeed made specific provisions in his will regarding the succession, but they were complex arrangements that most people, including Marcus himself, didn't fully understand. Tell me what you're thinking, Your Highness. My eldest brother, Robert, is heir to the throne, and my second brother, William, is designated as Robert's heir until Robert has sons of his own. But there was something else, wasn't there? Something about what would happen if both my brothers died without heirs. The knight's face went pale as he realized where Marcus's reasoning was leading. Your Highness, according to your father's will, if both Prince Robert and Prince William were to die without male heirs, the crown would pass to you. And if you were to die before coming of age, the crown would pass to the nearest male relative in the royal line. Marcus finished quietly. Which would be Lord Cassius, Sir Edmund whispered. His grandfather was King Alexander's great-uncle. The bloodline is distant, but it's legitimate. The full scope of the plot suddenly became terrifyingly clear. Marcus wasn't being targeted because of anything he had done. He was being targeted because of what he represented. If something happened to his older brothers and then to him, Lord Cassius would become the heir to the throne of Valdoria. But my brothers are safe, Marcus said, trying to convince himself as much as Sir Edmund. Robert is with the army in the eastern provinces, and William is studying diplomacy in the court of King Frederick. They're both far from here and well protected.
Sir Edmund's expression remained grim. Your Highness, I think we need to assume that if Lord Cassius is moving against you, he may already have plans in motion regarding your brothers as well.
We need to act quickly. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his young shoulders. Not just responsibility for his own safety, but for the future of the entire kingdom. What do you think we should do? First, we need to get word to your mother about our suspicions, but we must be extremely careful about how we do it. Lord Cassius has significant influence over the Queen, and she trusts him implicitly. If we approach her directly with accusations, she might dismiss our concerns or, worse, confide in Cassius himself. Marcus nodded, understanding the delicate political situation. And second, we need to consider the possibility that you may not be safe within the castle much longer. If Lord Cassius is planning to move against you soon, we need to be prepared to protect you by any means necessary. The idea of leaving the only home he had ever known sent a chill through Marcus, but he forced himself to think practically. Where could we go? Who would help us? Sir Edmund had clearly been considering this question. There are several possibilities. Lord Garrett of Ironhold has been a loyal friend to your family for decades, and his castle is strongly fortified. Alternatively, Master Aldwin has connections with the scholarly community in the free city of Westport. They would shelter you while we gathered evidence of the plot. Before Marcus could respond, they both heard footsteps approaching from the main corridor, multiple people walking with purpose rather than the casual pace of normal castle traffic. Sir Edmund immediately moved to position himself between Marcus and the door, his hand moving to his sword hilt. The footsteps stopped outside Marcus's chambers, and a moment later came a soft knock. Your Highness? The voice belonged to Lady Margaret, one of Queen Isabella's most trusted ladies in waiting. Your mother requests your immediate presence in her private study. She says it's a matter of great urgency. Marcus and Sir Edmund exchanged glances. Lady Margaret's loyalty to the Queen was unquestioned, but the late hour and the urgency of the summons were suspicious. Why would the Queen need to see Marcus privately at midnight unless something significant had happened? Tell Her Majesty that His Highness will attend her shortly, Sir Edmund replied.
He needs a moment to dress appropriately. I'm afraid the Queen was quite insistent that the Prince come immediately, Lady Margaret responded. She said time is of the essence. Sir Edmund's instincts were now screaming warnings. In all his years of service, he had never known Queen Isabella to summon any of her children at midnight without explanation, particularly not with such urgent language. Something was very wrong.
Lady Margaret, he called through the door. Is the Queen alone in her study, or are there others with her? There was a pause before the answer came, and when it did, Sir Edmund detected a note of strain in the lady's voice. Lord Cassius is with her, along with several members of his personal guard. They're ensuring her safety during these difficult times. The euphemism was clear enough. Queen Isabella was not requesting Marcus's presence. She was being used as bait to lure him into a trap. Lord Cassius had moved faster than they had anticipated, and now the Queen herself was likely in danger. Marcus stepped close to Sir Edmund and whispered urgently, "We have to help her." "Your Highness," the knight whispered back, "if we walk into that room, we'll be walking directly into Lord Cassius's hands. There will likely be too many of his men for me to fight effectively, and once he has both you and your mother under his control, he'll be able to do whatever he pleases. But we can't just leave her." Sir Edmund's mind raced through possibilities, weighing risks and potential outcomes. "We're not going to leave her, but we need to be smart about how we handle this. Do you remember the hidden passages your father showed you when you were younger? The ones that connect the royal chambers to the lower levels of the castle?" Marcus nodded. King Alexander had revealed several of the castle's secret passages to his sons, explaining that they were ancient defensive measures that might one day prove useful. Marcus had explored them occasionally, treating them as an amusing diversion rather than practical escape routes. "There's a passage that leads from the wall behind your bookshelf to an observation point above your mother's study," Sir Edmund continued. "If we can get there quietly, we might be able to assess the situation and possibly help her without walking directly into the trap." "Lady Margaret," Marcus called out, projecting his voice to sound calm and compliant, "please tell my mother that I'll be with her in just a few moments. I want to dress properly before appearing in her presence. But please don't delay." Lord Cassius seemed quite concerned about some urgent matters that needed to be discussed. As the footsteps retreated, Sir Edmund moved quickly to help Marcus prepare for what might be a very dangerous night. The knight gathered essential supplies, Marcus's warmest cloak, a small bag of gold coins from the prince's personal funds, and a hunting knife that could be concealed beneath clothing. "Your Highness," Sir Edmund said as he worked, "I want you to understand something clearly. If things go badly tonight, your survival is more important than anything else. More important than the castle. More important than individual people. Even more important than your mother. You are the legitimate heir to this throne, and preserving your life preserves the kingdom's future. Do you understand?" Marcus felt tears sting his eyes, but he nodded. "I understand." "But Sir Edmund, I can't just run away and let Lord Cassius hurt people I love." "You're not running away. You're making a strategic withdrawal so that you can fight another day from a position of strength. Sometimes the bravest thing a leader can do is live to protect his people rather than die uselessly." Together they moved to the bookshelf that concealed the hidden passage. Sir Edmund activated the mechanism, and the shelf swung aside silently to reveal a narrow stone corridor. They stepped into the passage, and Sir Edmund carefully closed the entrance behind them. The passage was dark and narrow, lit only by occasional oil lamps that cast flickering shadows on the ancient stone walls. Marcus had always found these passages mysterious and exciting, but now they felt oppressive and frightening. The weight of the castle above them seemed to press down like a physical presence. They moved as quietly as possible through the twisting corridors, following a route that Sir Edmund seemed to know by heart. The knight had clearly spent time learning the layout of these passages, probably as part of his security planning for the royal family. After several minutes of careful navigation, they reached a section of wall that was pierced by small observation holes, spy holes that allowed someone to see into the Queen's private study without being detected. Sir Edmund peered through first and motioned for Marcus to look. The scene in the study confirmed their worst fears. Queen Isabella sat rigidly in her chair, her face pale but composed. Lord Cassius stood behind her, one hand resting on her shoulder, in what might appear to be a gesture of comfort but was clearly a restraint.
The soccer fire face in time's light had sighted me.
4 armed guards stood at strategic positions around the room, their hands on their weapons. "Isabella," Cassius was saying in his smooth voice,
I really think it would be best if you simply sent word for Marcus to come down.
We can explain everything to him once he's here, and then we can all travel together to Duke Aldrich's estate. It will be much more pleasant for everyone if we avoid any unnecessary complications. Queen Isabella's voice was steady but strained when she replied.
Cassius, I still don't understand why this visit has become so urgent, or why it requires such security measures.
These men aren't necessary for a simple family discussion. Oh, but they are necessary, dear cousin. You see, I've recently learned some very disturbing information about potential threats to young Marcus's safety. There are those in the court who may wish to harm him, and I've taken it upon myself to ensure his protection.
Marcus felt sick listening to the lies flowing so smoothly from Cassius's lips. The man was using genuine security concerns to mask his own sinister intentions, and he was doing it so skillfully that even Queen Isabella might be partially convinced.
What kind of threats? The Queen asked.
Why wasn't I informed through normal security channels? Cassius's hand tightened slightly on her shoulder. Because, dear Isabella, the threats may be coming from within those very security channels.
I have reason to believe that certain members of the castle guard may have been compromised by outside influences.
The implication was clear. Cassius was setting up Sir Edmund and possibly other loyal guards as scapegoats for the very conspiracy he himself was orchestrating. It was a masterful piece of manipulation, turning the Queen's natural protective instincts against the people who were actually trying to protect her son.
Sir Edmund leaned close to Marcus's ear and whispered almost silently, "We need to leave. Now."
He's not just planning to take you, he's planning to frame me and eliminate anyone who might oppose him. Marcus nodded reluctantly, but as they prepared to withdraw from the observation point, they heard Queen Isabella's voice take on a new tone of authority.
Cassius, I appreciate your concern for Marcus's safety, but I find your methods highly irregular. If there are genuine threats to my son's security, they should be investigated through proper channels, not handled through midnight meetings and armed escorts.
Isabella, Cassius replied, and now there was a harder edge to his voice. I had hoped we could handle this matter cooperatively, but if necessary, I'm prepared to take whatever measures are required to ensure Marcus's safety, with or without your consent.
The Queen stood abruptly, forcing Cassius to step back. Are you threatening me, cousin?
In my own castle? Because if you are, I should remind you that I am still the Queen of Valdoria, and threatening the royal family is an act of treason.
Marcus felt a surge of pride at his mother's courage, but also terror at the dangerous game she was playing.
Cassius's mask was finally beginning to slip, and when men like him felt cornered, they often became desperate and violent. Cassius smiled, but it was a cold expression devoid of any warmth or humanity.
Isabella, you seem to be under the impression that you have some choice in this matter. Allow me to clarify the situation for you.
He gestured to his guards, who immediately moved to surround the Queen more closely. You see, dear cousin, sometimes the preservation of the kingdom requires difficult decisions.
Sometimes it requires removing obstacles that stand in the way of strong leadership. And you consider my 12-year-old son an obstacle? I consider your entire branch of the family tree to be an unfortunate impediment to Valdoria's future prosperity. Your late husband was weak, your elder sons are incompetent, and young Marcus shows every sign of inheriting the same flawed character traits. The kingdom deserves better leadership.
Queen Isabella's face had gone very pale, but her voice remained steady. You're talking about murdering children, Cassius.
My children. How can you possibly justify such evil? I justify it by considering the greater good.
Under my leadership, Valdoria could become a true power in the region rather than the weak, backward kingdom it has become under your family's rule. Sometimes greatness requires sacrifice.
Marcus had heard enough. He pulled at Sir Edmund's sleeve, indicating they needed to leave immediately.
The knight nodded and began leading them back through the passage, moving as quickly as silence would allow. As they retreated, they heard Cassius's voice echoing from the study. Now, Isabella, you're going to send word for Marcus to come down here immediately.
If you refuse, my men will go and fetch him anyway, but it will be much more pleasant for everyone if you cooperate. What will it be?
Sir Edmund and Marcus reached the passage exit behind the bookshelf in Marcus's chamber just as they heard footsteps in the main corridor outside, heavy boots moving with military precision. Cassius wasn't waiting for the Queen's cooperation. He was sending his men to collect Marcus regardless.
Your Highness, Sir Edmund whispered urgently. We have perhaps 30 seconds before they reach this door. Are you ready to do this? Marcus looked around his bedroom, knowing he might never see it again. Everything familiar and comfortable in his life was about to be left behind. But he also knew that staying meant certain death. not just for himself but potentially for his mother and brothers as well.
"I'm ready," he whispered back. Sir Edmund activated a different mechanism, and another section of the wall opened to reveal a passage that led toward the lower levels of the castle.
This route would take them to the old dungeons and from there to a tunnel that emerged in the forest outside the castle walls. As they stepped into the passage and Sir Edmund sealed it behind them, they heard pounding on Marcus's bedroom door and angry voices demanding entry.
The chase had begun, and their head start was measured in minutes rather than hours. They moved through the dark passages as quickly as they dared, their footsteps echoing softly in the narrow stone corridors. Behind them, they could hear muffled shouts and the sound of splintering wood as Cassius's men broke down the bedroom door. "He's not here," came a distant voice.
Search the entire floor, check every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Sir Edmund led Marcus through a series of increasingly narrow passages, some of which required them to crawl rather than walk.
The knight's knowledge of these routes was proving invaluable. But Marcus could hear their pursuers spreading out through the castle, searching systematically.
"Sir Edmund," Marcus whispered as they paused at an intersection of passages, "what about my mother? What will happen to her now?" The knight's face was grim in the flickering lamplight.
"Your Highness, Lord Cassius needs the Queen alive, at least for now. She's his only way of maintaining legitimacy while he consolidates power.
As long as she doesn't actively oppose him, she should be relatively safe. But for how long? Sir Edmund didn't answer immediately, and his silence was answer enough.
Once Cassius had eliminated the direct heirs to the throne, Queen Isabella would become a liability rather than an asset. Her survival would depend entirely on her willingness to support the man who had murdered her sons.
They continued through the passages, always moving downward toward the castle's foundations. The air grew colder and damper as they descended, and Marcus could smell the musty scent of centuries-old stone and stagnant water.
Finally, they reached the bottom level, a series of chambers that had once served as dungeons but had been abandoned for decades. Sir Edmund led Marcus to what appeared to be a solid stone wall. But when he pressed a specific sequence of stones, a section of the wall swung inward to reveal the entrance to a tunnel.
"This tunnel runs for nearly half a mile underground before emerging in Blackwood Forest," Sir Edmund explained as they prepared to enter. "It was built as an escape route during the War of the Three Crowns, over a century ago.
Very few people know it exists." As they stepped into the tunnel, Marcus heard distant sounds echoing down through the passages they had just traversed. Men's voices, the clang of weapons, the systematic search drawing closer to their location. The tunnel was even narrower than the castle passages, and completely dark.
Sir Edmund had brought a small oil lamp, but he kept it shuttered to prevent any light from betraying their position.
They moved by feel, one hand on the tunnel wall, stepping carefully to avoid loose stones that might create noise. The journey through the tunnel felt like it took hours, though Marcus knew it was probably less than 30 minutes. Every sound seemed magnified in the enclosed space, their breathing, their footsteps, the distant drip of water from somewhere in the darkness. Finally, Sir Edmund stopped and whispered, "We're almost to the exit. From here, we need to be extremely careful. Lord Cassius may have anticipated that we might try to leave the castle, and he could have men waiting outside."
They climbed a series of rough stone steps that led upward to what appeared to be another solid wall. Sir Edmund listened carefully at the wall for several minutes before activating the mechanism that would open their exit to the outside world.
The wall swung aside to reveal the pre-dawn darkness of Blackwood Forest. The exit was concealed behind a thick screen of brambles and bushes that made it nearly invisible from the outside. Sir Edmund extinguished their lamp completely and listened intently for any sounds that might indicate the presence of guards. The forest was quiet except for the normal sounds of wind in the trees and distant night birds.
After several minutes of careful observation, Sir Edmund decided it was safe to proceed. They emerged from the tunnel into a world that felt completely different from the familiar walls of the castle.
The open sky above, the whisper of wind through leaves, the scent of earth and growing things, everything reminded Marcus that his old life was truly behind him now. "Where do we go from here?" Marcus asked quietly.
Sir Edmund oriented himself by the stars and pointed toward a barely visible path through the trees. "First, we put some distance between ourselves and the castle, and we make our way to Ironhold, where Lord Garrett can provide us with sanctuary while we plan our next moves." As they started into the forest, Marcus looked back once at the castle where he had lived his entire life. Lights were visible in many of the windows as Cassius's men continued their search. Somewhere in those stone walls his mother was a prisoner, and his future, the future of the entire kingdom, hung in the balance. But he was alive, and he was free,
And as long as those two things remained true, there was hope. Dawn was breaking over Blackwood Forest when Marcus and Sir Edmund finally allowed themselves a brief rest. They had been traveling through the wilderness for over 6 hours, following ancient deer trails and shepherd's paths that kept them well away from the main roads. Both were exhausted, hungry, and beginning to feel the full weight of their desperate situation. Sir Edmund found a sheltered spot beneath a fallen oak tree where they could rest while remaining hidden from any search parties that might be following them. As Marcus settled gratefully onto the soft forest floor, the knight pulled out a small package of dried meat and bread that he had grabbed during their hasty departure from the castle. "We need to eat something and rest for a few minutes," Sir Edmund said, offering half the food to Marcus, "but we can't stay long. Lord Cassius will have search parties combing these woods as soon as there's enough light to track effectively." Marcus accepted the food gratefully, suddenly realizing how hungry he was.
The events of the night had been so intense that he had forgotten basic physical needs, but now his empty stomach was making urgent demands for attention. As they ate in silence, Marcus found himself thinking about the magnitude of what had happened.
Less than 24 hours ago, his greatest concern had been whether he would be allowed to spend the afternoon in the library.
Now he was a fugitive from his own home, his mother was a prisoner, and a treasonous plot threatened to destroy everything his family had built over generations.
"Sir Edmund," he said quietly, "do you really think Lord Cassius has moved against my brothers as well?"
"I think we have to assume the worst, Your Highness. A man like Cassius doesn't undertake a conspiracy of this magnitude without planning for every contingency."
Your brothers represent direct threats to his ambitions, just as you do. The thought of Robert and William in danger made Marcus feel sick with worry.
His older brothers had always been his protectors and role models, and the idea that they might be facing the same deadly threats felt overwhelming. "But," Sir Edmund continued, "your brothers are not children."
Prince Robert is an experienced military commander with loyal troops under his command. Prince William is in the court of a foreign king, surrounded by diplomatic protections.
"They may be better positioned to defend themselves than you were in the castle." Marcus nodded, trying to find comfort in the knight's reasoning.
What happens if we can't prove what Lord Cassius is doing? What happens if people believe his version of events instead of ours? It was a terrifying question, and Sir Edmund's expression showed that he understood the implications fully.
"Then, Your Highness, we will have to rebuild from nothing. We'll have to gather loyal supporters, prove your identity and legitimacy, and fight to reclaim what is rightfully yours."
It won't be easy, and it may take years. Years? Marcus felt his heart sink. The idea of spending years in exile while Cassius ruled Valdoria was almost unbearable. But, Sir Edmund added with a slight smile, I don't think it will come to that.
Lord Cassius may be clever and ruthless, but he's also arrogant.
Arrogant men make mistakes, and when they do, people like us are there to take advantage of those mistakes. A distant sound made both of them freeze, the bay of hunting hounds still far off but unmistakably moving in their direction.
Sir Edmund cursed quietly under his breath. Cassius had indeed organized pursuit teams, and they were using dogs to track their quarry through the forest.
How much of a head start do we have? Marcus asked, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. Sir Edmund listened carefully to the sounds echoing through the trees.
Maybe an hour, perhaps a bit more. The dogs will move faster than we can, but they still have to follow our trail.
If we're smart about how we move, we might be able to confuse or delay them. They quickly packed up their meager supplies and resumed their flight through the forest.
Sir Edmund led them to a small stream that meandered through the woods, and they began walking in the shallow water to break their scent trail. The cold mountain water soaked through their boots immediately, making each step an uncomfortable reminder of their precarious situation.
Sir Edmund, Marcus said as they splashed through the stream, tell me about Lord Garrett of Ironhold. Can we really trust him to help us? The knight nodded confidently.
Lord Garrett fought alongside your father during the border wars. He saved the king's life at the Battle of Raven's Pass, and your father saved his at the Siege of Thornfield.
They swore blood oaths to each other, the kind of bonds that don't break, even in death. If anyone in the kingdom will help us, it's Lord Garrett.
They followed the stream for nearly an hour, using fallen logs and rocky banks to vary their route and make tracking more difficult. The sound of the hounds grew closer at times, then faded as the search parties spread out across the forest.
Marcus began to hope that their water trail was working to throw off their pursuers.
As they emerged from the stream onto a hillside meadow, Sir Edmund suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him behind a large boulder. Stay down and stay quiet, he whispered urgently.
Marcus peered around the edge of the boulder and saw what had alarmed the night. A group of mounted men was crossing the meadow about a quarter-mile away, 6 riders wearing the black and silver colors of Cassius's personal guard.
They were moving systematically across the landscape, clearly searching for signs of passage. One of the riders raised his hand and the group stopped. The man pulled out what appeared to be a small horn and blew a series of short, sharp notes. Almost immediately, similar horn calls echoed from other directions: north, south, and east. The searchers were coordinating their efforts, closing in on the area where Marcus and Sir Edmund were hiding.
"They're good,"
Sir Edmund muttered grimly.
Better organized than I hoped they would be. As they watched, more groups of riders appeared at the edges of the meadow. Within minutes, what had seemed like a safe crossing had become a trap.
They were surrounded on three sides, with only the route back toward the castle remaining open.
"What do we do now?"
Marcus whispered. Sir Edmund studied the terrain carefully, weighing their limited options. The meadow offered no real concealment, and the surrounding forest was being systematically searched. Going back toward the castle meant walking directly into more search parties, but staying where they were meant being discovered within minutes. "Your Highness," the knight said quietly, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. In about 2 minutes, I'm going to create a distraction that will draw those riders away from this area. When I do, you need to run directly north toward that line of pine trees. Once you reach the trees, keep moving north until you reach the old stone bridge over Silverbrook Creek. Do you remember where that is?" Marcus nodded. The bridge was a landmark he knew from hunting trips with his father, about 2 miles north of their current position. "Good. Wait at the bridge for exactly 2 hours.
If I haven't joined you by then, continue north to Ironhold on your own. Lord Garrett's castle is about a day's journey from the bridge, following the north road.
Tell him what has happened and show him this ring." Sir Edmund pulled off a heavy gold signet ring and pressed it into Marcus's hand. "He'll recognize it as proof that you're truly under my protection." Marcus stared at the ring. It bore Sir Edmund's family crest, and had been given to the knight by Marcus's father as a symbol of their bond. "Sir Edmund, what kind of distraction are you planning?" "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me." The knight's weathered face softened slightly. "Your Highness, my job is to protect you, whatever the cost. Sometimes protection requires sacrifice, but I'm not planning to throw my life away carelessly. I'm just going to even the odds a bit." Before Marcus could protest further, Sir Edmund was moving. The knight emerged from behind the boulder and began running directly toward the nearest group of riders, shouting at the top of his lungs. "There he is! Prince Marcus is heading for the eastern hills. I see him." The effect was immediate and dramatic. All the search parties converged on Sir Edmund's position, assuming he was one of their own, providing crucial information. By the time they realized their mistake, the knight had drawn them nearly half a mile from Marcus's hiding spot. Marcus used the confusion to sprint toward the pine forest, running harder than he had ever run in his life. Behind him, he could hear shouts of anger and the sound of swords being drawn as Sir Edmund's deception was discovered. The knight was now fighting for his life against overwhelming odds, buying Marcus precious time with his own blood. The young prince reached the tree line just as the sounds of combat reached their peak. He forced himself not to look back, knowing that Sir Edmund's sacrifice would be meaningless if he allowed himself to be recaptured. Instead, he plunged into the dense pine forest and continued running north, tears streaming down his face. The next 2 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He made his way through unfamiliar terrain, following the sun and his instincts to maintain a northward course. Every sound made him freeze in terror. Every snapping twig might be a pursuer. Every bird call might be a signal from enemy scouts. When he finally reached the old stone bridge over Silverbrook Creek, Marcus was exhausted, scratched from brambles, and emotionally drained from worry about Sir Edmund. The bridge was exactly as he remembered it, an ancient stone arch spanning a clear mountain stream, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of flowing water and rustling leaves. Marcus found a hiding spot beneath the bridge where he could watch for approaching riders while remaining concealed himself. The waiting was torture. Every minute that passed without Sir Edmund's arrival made it more likely that the knight had been killed or captured. As the 2-hour deadline approached, Marcus heard the sound of a single horse approaching from the south. His heart leaped with hope, but he forced himself to remain hidden until he could identify the rider. It might be Sir Edmund, but it could just as easily be one of Cassius's men following their trail. The rider who appeared at the bridge was indeed Sir Edmund, but Marcus barely recognized him. The knight's clothes were torn and blood-stained, his left arm hung at an awkward angle, and his face bore the marks of a savage fight. But he was alive, and he was alone. Marcus emerged from his hiding place and ran to help Sir Edmund dismount from his horse. "Sir Edmund," I thought. I was afraid. The knight managed a weak smile. "Takes more than 6 of Cassius's hired swords to finish an old soldier like me, Your Highness."
though I'll admit they came closer than I would have preferred. Are you badly hurt? Should we rest here while you recover? Sir Edmund shook his head firmly. We can't stop now. I killed 2 of them and wounded the others, but more will be coming. And now they know for certain that we're heading north toward Ironhold. We need to reach Lord Garrett's protection before they can organize another pursuit. They mounted Sir Edmund's horse together. The animal was strong enough to carry both riders for the remaining distance to Ironhold. As they rode north along the ancient road, Sir Edmund explained what had happened during their separation.
The distraction worked better than I had hoped, he said, swaying slightly in the saddle from exhaustion and blood loss. Most of their forces went chasing shadows in the eastern hills. But the group I fought was commanded by Captain Valdris, one of Cassius's most experienced men. He won't be fooled again, and he won't give up easily.
The name sent a chill through Marcus. Captain Valdris had a reputation for ruthless efficiency and absolute loyalty to whoever paid him.
If Cassius had hired him to lead the pursuit, they were facing a much more dangerous enemy than ordinary guards.
How much time do we have before they catch up? Marcus asked. If we're lucky, perhaps 4 or 5 hours. Valdris will need time to reorganize his forces and pick up our trail again.
But once he does, he'll follow us all the way to Ironhold's gates if necessary.
The landscape gradually changed as they rode north.
The dense forests gave way to rolling hills dotted with sheep pastures and small farming villages. It was peaceful countryside that Marcus had always loved, but now it felt exposed and dangerous. Anyone they encountered might be a potential informant for their enemies.
As the sun reached its zenith, they crested a hill that offered their first view of Ironhold Castle in the distance. The massive fortress stood on a rocky promontory overlooking a river valley, its gray stone walls and towers projecting an impression of absolute impregnability. Black banners bearing Lord Garrett's silver wolf crest flew from the highest towers, and Marcus felt a surge of hope at the sight.
We're almost there, Sir Edmund said, though his voice was getting weaker. Lord Garrett will protect us, and from there we can begin planning how to expose Cassius's treachery. But as they approached the castle, they encountered an unexpected complication. A large encampment had been established in the valley below Ironhold. Dozens of tents and hundreds of horses, with armed men moving purposefully between them. The banner flying over the main pavilion bore the black and gold colors of Duke Aldrich of Thornwood. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Sir Edmund, isn't that the Duke who was supposed to host me for that visit? What is he doing here? The knight's face had gone pale, though whether from blood loss or alarm was impossible to tell. This is very bad, Your Highness. If Duke Aldrich is here with a military force, it can only mean one thing. He and Lord Garrett are either in alliance or Ironhold is under siege. They reined in their horse and studied the scene below more carefully. The encampment showed no signs of active siege operations. No siege engines. No assault preparations. Instead, it looked more like a gathering of allies preparing for a coordinated action. I think, Sir Edmund said slowly, that we may have walked into another trap. If Lord Garrett has been compromised or coerced into supporting Cassius's conspiracy, then Ironhold is not a sanctuary. It's a prison waiting for us to enter voluntarily. Marcus felt despair washing over him. They couldn't trust Lord Garrett, then who could they trust? Where could they go for safety in a kingdom where even family friends might be part of the conspiracy against him? But before they could decide on a new course of action, the decision was made for them. A horn call rang out from the castle walls. They had been spotted by the guards. Almost immediately, riders emerged from both the castle and the encampment below, moving to surround their position. Your Highness, Sir Edmund said urgently, we have perhaps 2 minutes before they reach us. We can try to run again, but this horse is tired and I'm wounded. We probably won't make it very far. Marcus looked around desperately, weighing their impossible options. They were on open ground with nowhere to hide, facing fresh enemies while riding an exhausted horse. Even if they tried to flee, they would likely be captured within minutes. Or, Sir Edmund continued, we can ride down there and see what Lord Garrett has to say for himself. It's possible that there's an explanation for Duke Aldrich's presence that doesn't involve betrayal. And if we're going to be captured anyway, we might as well maintain some dignity in the process. The approaching riders were close enough now that Marcus could see their faces. Some wore Lord Garrett's colors, but others bore the insignia of Thornwood. Leading the group was a tall man in expensive armor, whose bearing and age suggested he might be Lord Garrett himself. Marcus made his decision. We'll go down and see what they have to say. But Sir Edmund, if this goes badly, Your Highness, then we'll face whatever comes with courage. That's all anyone can ask of us.
They rode down the hill toward the approaching riders, both knowing that they were likely riding toward capture or death, but determined to meet their fate with the dignity befitting a prince and a knight of the realm.
Lord Garrett indeed led the approaching group.
He was a man in his 50s with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of their appearance. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of decades of military command.
Sir Edmund of Westmarch, he said formally, you ride hard and carry wounds. What brings you to my lands in such haste, and in the company of? His eyes settled on Marcus, and his expression suddenly changed to one of recognition and concern.
By all the saints, is that Prince Marcus?
It is, my lord, Sir Edmund replied carefully. We come seeking sanctuary and assistance in a matter of utmost urgency to the crown. Lord Garrett's eyes flicked to Duke Aldrich, who had ridden up beside him.
The Duke was a thin man with calculating eyes and a carefully groomed beard. When he spoke, his voice was silky and controlled.
How interesting, Duke Aldrich said. Young Prince Marcus, we've been looking forward to your visit to my estates.
Though I must say you seem to have taken rather an unconventional route to get here. Marcus felt Sir Edmund tense beside him, and he knew that their worst fears were being confirmed.
Duke Aldrich's presence here was no coincidence. It was part of the same conspiracy that had driven them from the castle. But before either Marcus or Sir Edmund could respond, Lord Garrett surprised them both.
Aldrich, he said sharply, I believe we need to discuss this matter privately before proceeding further. Prince Marcus and Sir Edmund look exhausted and wounded. They should be offered the hospitality appropriate to their stations while we sort out what's really happening here. Duke Aldrich's eyes narrowed slightly.
Of course, Garrett.
Though I think it would be wise to ensure their security while we talk.
Their security will be my responsibility, Lord Garrett replied firmly.
This is my castle and they are my guests. Sir Edmund, Prince Marcus, will you accompany me to Ironhold?
We have much to discuss. As they rode toward the castle gates, Marcus caught Sir Edmund's eye and saw a glimmer of hope there.
Lord Garrett's words and manner suggested that perhaps not everything was as hopeless as it had appeared, but they were still surrounded by armed men, still far from safety, and still facing enemies whose full capabilities they didn't yet understand.
The massive gates of Ironhold Castle swung open to receive them, and Marcus realized that whatever happened next would determine not just his own fate, but the future of the entire kingdom of Valdoria. In the space of a single day, he had gone from being a sheltered prince to being a key player in a deadly Game of Thrones. A game where the stakes were nothing less than the crown itself.
As they passed beneath the iron portcullis and into the castle courtyard, Lord Garrett leaned close to Marcus and spoke in a voice too low for the others to hear. Your Highness, he said quietly, things are not always what they seem.
Trust me for now, and all may yet be well. With those cryptic words echoing in his mind, Marcus entered Ironhold Castle, knowing that his real test was just beginning.